And good morning, YouTube. Dr. Abe here. I wanted to follow up last night's video with something a little more lighthearted today. As some of you know, I'm a Civil War junkie. Perhaps many of you watching out in YouTube land are Civil War junkies yourself. I love reading about the topic. There's so much to it. I read an article some years ago that said to develop any kind of working knowledge on a topic of any depth, someone would have to read at least 5 books on the topic to have an introductory knowledge of it. And so I want to share with you my favorite 6 Civil War titles. I wasn't able to get it down to 5. There were 2 that I couldn't decide on. So I'm going to share my top 6. There's so much that's been published about this. New books coming out about the Civil War every year. And you would think that all the scholarship that could be done has been done, but no, people are still finding new wrinkles to talk about with the Civil War, even 150 years plus later. And so it can be kind of hard to decide, well, where do I even start? If I want to learn about the Civil War, what are a few titles that would help me? Or maybe if I'm helping someone else learn about the Civil War, maybe it's a child, or maybe you have a relative who's interested in history, whatever the case may be. I'm going to present 6 titles today that hopefully will help you get started on your Civil War reading, or maybe add to reading that you've already done on the topic. The first book that I really like is William C. Davis's Look Away, A History of the Confederate States of America. And the reason I like this one is because it's probably the most comprehensive book out there on the Confederacy itself, focusing on how their government was set up, the idea of states' rights, why that ultimately failed, and how the Confederate experiment in democracy actually started. William C. Davis, first-rate scholar, and really does a nice job of looking at how the Southern government was constructed beyond some of the myths that that we hear about so often, the Gone with the Wind kinds of things, and just he gives a more of a layman's understanding, if you will, of states' rights, what that was all about. He profiles some of the major leaders of the Confederacy. And so it's just a great comprehensive look at the political underpinnings of the Confederacy. And if you're really wanting to understand the Confederacy in particular and how things developed, this is a great place to start with William C. Davis's book. Staying on that topic for a little bit, I bring you to probably my favorite Civil War book because of how just amazingly unique the book is. This is called Apostles of Disunion, and it's by Charles B. Dew, and the subtitle is Southern Secession Commissioners and the Causes of the Civil War. This is published by University of Virginia Press, and it's only a little over 100 pages in length, not counting the source documents. So you can read this in a matter of a couple of hours. It's a very quick read. And what I find most interesting about it is it talks about how I would really call them, they were called secession commissioners, but I would basically call them PR agents, who were sort of commissioned to go around to the state conventions where they were contemplating secession and actually advocate for secession. I didn't know that was even a thing, or that had happened. But one really interesting story out of here is I can't remember the gentleman's name, I'd have to look in the book, but he was Secretary of the Interior under James Buchanan, who was the president immediately preceding Lincoln. And he was actually a Southern Secession Commissioner. So while he was in his official capacity as Secretary of the Interior of the United States, he was actually going around to these southern states drumming up the cause of secession. So some really interesting stuff in here. Again, it has the source documents, which are fascinating. The secession, one particular secession document in here. So if you really want to understand the Southern mindset in seceding, I would pick this one up. It's a great addition to any Civil War library. Apostles of Disunion, Charles Dew. Probably the most exciting Civil War book in my library. This one reads like a thriller. It's James L. Swanson's Manhunt, and some would argue as to whether this is actually a Civil War book. I think Lincoln's assassination and the manhunt for John Wilkes Booth absolutely is part of the overall narrative of the Civil War. And this one, the author does a phenomenal job of drawing on historical documents and newspaper articles of the time. And he crafts just a ripping narrative. This reads like a thriller. I remember the first night I got this, I got it for Christmas a couple of years ago. I stayed up till 3 a.m. To finish this book because I couldn't put it down. It was that exciting. So much in here about the manhunt for Booth and his conspirators that just really isn't publicly known. So very highly recommended. And it also goes into some of the politics of the time, what various parts of the country were feeling in the aftermath of Lincoln's assassination. So besides this being just an incredibly good read, you can learn a lot too about just the psyche of the country at the time. And then continuing the theme of the aftermath of the war, one of my favorites in that is Carolyn E. Janney's Ends of War. And the subtitle is The Unfinished Fight of Lee's Army After Appomattox. And Dr. Janney is a first-rate, Janey, is a first-rate scholar, but more importantly, she really gets into the challenges that Confederate soldiers faced returning to their homes at the end of the war, and how there was some ambiguity in Grant's surrender terms at the end of the war, and how different localities interpreted those differently. And so, sometimes when Confederate soldiers returned home, they were criminals and they were arrested and their houses were torched and burned. Sometimes they just went home and picked up life like it had never stopped. And so it does a really good job of looking at some of the ways that regionalism impacted the end of the war, and the struggles that the Confederate soldiers in particular faced reintegrating to life. Some never did. Some went to prison. Some were paroled. And so it's a wonderful survey of just how the war ended and what that looked like for both sides, but primarily for the Confederacy. And the last title I'm going to share, well, I've got two more actually. This one, if you're looking for reading on a particular Civil War battle, one of the strategic ways that you can sort of divvy up reading about the Civil War is reading about particular battles. And this one is Stephen Sears' Gettysburg. Stephen Sears is, besides being a phenomenal scholar from Ohio State University, Stephen Sears is a great storyteller. And in this, he tells the story of the Battle of Gettysburg. This won a Fletcher Pratt Award for its best nonfiction book about the Civil War the year that it was published. And it's just an amazing read. And I'll just give you one of the chapter subtitles. It was "A Simile of Hell Broke Loose." So you can tell just by the chapter titles that this is a man who knows how to write and craft a great story. And the best part is it's true, and really goes into some of the failures of both Union and Confederate commands at Gettysburg, and the consequences of those, and how the different commands set up their headquarters and different things like that. A lot of great stuff in this book, but more than that, just a fabulous narrative. And last but definitely not least, one of my favorites, possibly of his time, the most prominent Civil War scholar, Gary Gallagher. And he wrote this book, Causes Won, Lost, and Forgotten: How Hollywood and Popular Art Shape What We Know About the Civil War. So in this, Gary Gallagher talks about how the Civil War is portrayed in movies, and how some of those inaccuracies have really created myths, that enduring myths about the Civil War that sort of stubbornly persist in the public imagination. And he also talks about how different battles were portrayed in paintings, in visual media as well. Just a fascinating book if you're looking to understand how public psyche, even up until today, continues to be shaped by some of these myths that people continue to believe about the Civil War. This is a fabulous book. And again, this one's a little bit shorter. It's with end notes and everything, just a little over 200 pages, so you can read it in a day. Highly recommend it. So please, in the comments below, if there are Civil War titles that you read, or that you like, or that you have found to be illuminating, please share those. We're here at Dr. Abe. I am 100% about sharing information, about sharing knowledge. And so if you've got a great title that you enjoy, please put it in the comments, and I will see you on the next broadcast. Have a great day.